live stream. This isn't normal, Johnny. What's happening? I don't.
Everything, man. Everything. We got to flip the script today.
Yeah, today's a little different. One, our interface here in Restream is broken. We didn't get to do our normal intro video and all that other stuff. I got to mentally prepare for these things. And two, our guest today, Scott, has very graciously, at the very last minute, bailed us out. So Johnny and I had a topic, had a guest. They had a conflict at the last minute, and Scott and I happened to be interacting in the same thread yesterday, and it clicked in my head. It was like, oh man, it'd be great if Scott could help us out. And he was very graciously agreed, but we only have him for the first 30 minutes, so basically till 11:30 Eastern. I'm Johnny and I are going to skip all of our normal stuff that we do at the beginning, and we'll do that in the second half of the show, because we want to talk to Scott and basically learn about data. And forgive me, I looked at the wrong place on my screen here. So, data-driven fleet management, Scott.
Yeah, so we use a lot of data to help us decide. I think most people are probably familiar with, we have a fast channel, we have a stable channel. We use a lot of data to make decisions about when things go into, in particular, the stable channel. So I think that's a good title or subject for this.
I like it. It was way better than the original title I had.
Stuff and updates.
Yeah, specifically related to updates.
Yeah. So I guess first, can you tell us what your team does, in particular relating to the update, upgrade, release process for OpenShift?
Sure. So I work closely with actually a few different teams, but in the context of this conversation, there's a team called the OTA, or over-the-air updates team, and they were conceived shortly after OpenShift 4 GA and tasked with sort of monitoring fleet data and managing the promotion process from the fast channel into the stable channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's that process has evolved over time, and I've been involved with that since roughly 4.3 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you say fleet management, you're referring to deployed OpenShift clusters, right? And kind of our customers and the things that they're doing as they go through those update upgrade processes, as well as all the QA QE engineering stuff inside of there, right?
Yeah, so all of this actually falls after all the normal QE process, and so it's how we manage the channels, and I think people that are familiar with OpenShift 4 know that connected clusters talk to an API, and that API gives them an overview of what potential upgrades they could take, and that is a service. And since it's a service, we can amend that data over time, and so that's what that team is in charge of monitoring and managing. Yeah.
Got it. And is that Cincinnati? Is that the Cincinnati service?
Cincinnati's the protocol. We call it the OpenShift Update Service, is the sort of productized name.
And I love our descriptive names.
Yeah, that is, we run an instance of that clusters by default talk to, and then it's also packaged up in an operator so that customers that have like a large disconnected fleet can talk to a service that they host, and largely it just mirrors the data that we provide.
Mm-hmm.
But they could also do things like manage channels on their own, in per their requirements, and add in policy, etc.
And just to give a visual behind that, so this is a 4.12.0 cluster that I deployed this morning. So when we come down here to cluster settings and we have this update channel, update status thing, this is talking to an API on the other end. And that API is what offers us, if I switch to, we'll go with candidate 412. So if I switch to something here, it offers, apparently there's no candidate releases, but it's what determines, it looks at your cluster and looks at what's available in the channel to be able to make recommendations and say, hey, you can go from 4.12.0 to 4.12.1 or 2 or 7 or 30 or whatever the versions happen to be, as well as the conditional updates, right?
Yeah, so that's a new feature that we added 410 clusters, based on amount of feedback where, um, you know, going back to what I said about we can amend the graph that's presented to a cluster because it's a service, and that all hinges around, like, we go through all the normal process of QE, we test everything, and then we send something out, and then some unique situation is encountered in the field and we find a critical flaw. So we would, prior to 410, we would go in and just remove that update edge from the graph entirely.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of negative feedback around, it was very hard for us to manage that. We had to manage that as sort of a big, huge binary thing. We either offer this update to everyone or we don't. So if it was like, uh, a situation that only happened on a certain platform or a certain cloud, we were holding back updates from other clouds. And so we, and then, so we just took a look at that and sort of the negative feedback of, just a hypothetical. We imagine we had a bug that only affected clusters on AWS. We, in that, prior to this, we would have to go in and, like, GCP clusters could not upgrade, even though they were unaffected by this bug. So in 410, we said, all right, well, let's fix this API and give it what we call conditional updates, where we could say, all right, we've identified a risk and it affects clusters which match this criteria. And so we actually present over the API a PromQL that's executed in cluster to say, all right, this is an AWS cluster. Don't recommend this update. And it's critical also to understand the difference between, like in the past, I said we blocked it. Like that edge would literally go away, and you wouldn't have any idea that it was there. Now in 410, we stop recommending it, and since the cluster is matching the risk, the cluster is actually aware of these things still, and it presents it to the admin as, this is not a recommended update, but it remains supported because our policy is anytime we publish an update edge, once it's published to supported channels, and that's the fast and stable channels, it remains supported forever.
Yeah. And sorry to interrupt you. I think you said something there that I really want to highlight as being important. And that's that when a cluster queries the API, it's not actually sending any of that data to the API. Rather, the API returns back a PromQL query, and the cluster queries itself to determine if it's eligible.
Yeah.
That to me is really important.
The only thing that we get back when you request the API, the Graph API, is the channel that you're in, the architecture, and your current version. And then we just send back a list of potential updates. And if any of those potential updates have a risk associated with them, going back to this hypothetical AWS problem, we send that back, and then the cluster itself evaluates that.
Mm-hmm. You say hypothetical AWS problem. I know, and many people who watch the stream, there was several instances where vSphere was the blocker for everyone because there was some issues with, I think it was the VMXNet 3, network adapter in the kernel, and it was back in the 4.8 timeframe, Johnny, 4.9, something like that. Yep. So yeah, it's a very real problem, and something that I'm super happy to see the conditional updates.
Yep.
So Dwayne asks, how fast can an update take effect? And Dwayne, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're asking how quickly does an update get published, or how quickly does an update get applied to the cluster? Scott, I think it's an important question to ask because you and I tend to answer these questions a lot in chat, of how quickly updates move between channels.
Yeah. So we can answer both of those questions too. So I guess maybe it's good to start from the beginning of the process. We go through a lot of engineering effort, and we produce a release, and so that's promoted generally, once a week, if we're considering like ZStream updates. And so that's promoted generally on Wednesday. That goes to the candidate channel. The point at which it's promoted is when we sort of hand it off for final QE regression testing. And then that happens over the span of like 5 days or so. And that's once that has been completed, QE doesn't find any regressions. They're continuously regression testing, but we sort of give them a final build that they run one final round on. Once that finishes, then the errata go out, and once the errata goes out, it's in the fast channel. And then in the context of ZStream updates, you're going from 4.10.0 to 4.10.1. That's a very small set of changes. Usually it's 20 to 30 bug fixes early on in the life cycle or product, or if it's something like 4.8, those Z streams will have like 2 fixes because it's a very mature product and we're not changing much. But either way, for Z stream updates, those generally move from the fast channel into the stable channel after about a week. Now, if we consider like a new minor version update, so we just shipped 4.12. I looked at the diff stats on just the cube rebase alone, and that was over 2 million lines of code change. Minor version updates also occasionally bring in like rel rebases. So, that represents a year's worth of rel development. And so if you look at a minor update, it's a huge change. And so the amount of risk there is significantly more. And so that's why we actually do take typically around 60 days to promote a new minor version upgrade from the fast channel to the stable channel. So I think that probably answers how fast things become available in channels.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out a couple of things. And Johnny and Scott, please offer or correct other things. So, one, like with a Y release, a minor release, so 4.10, 4.11, 4.12, even if it's not in the upgrade channel, it's still a fully GA and fully supported release. It's the process of updating or upgrading from 4.11 dot something to 4.12 dot something. That's where that 60-ish days, I know it changes, of testing and validation all comes in. And Hamza, to answer your question, is there any difference between update and upgrade? I'll say that it's mostly just a language thing. I personally use update to refer to a Z stream, so 4.10.12 to 4.10.14, and upgrade to refer to minor version upgrades, so 4.11 to 4.12.
Yeah, our documentation, we're centered everything around update, and the things that actually happen is exactly the same between a Z stream and a minor version update. But obviously the content of the change is significantly different. And then, like, not to dig too much into like how things happen, like the CVO goes through and applies updates to a bunch of operators. Each of those operators can behave differently between like a Z stream and a minor version update. So, but the fundamentals of how it works are all the same.
It's funny you say that because I never really thought about it, but you're absolutely correct, right? Whether it's a 4.10 to 4.11 or 4.10 dot something to 4.10 dot something else, it's literally the exact same process. It's, CVO is replacing container images, which update the operators. CoreOS gets patched the exact same way. It applies a new RPMOS tree image, which comes from a container image. And like, it's just the scope of what's changed inside of those container images that are being, redeployed or applied is different, as you said, particularly when there's things like rel rebases and Kubernetes rebases and all that.
If we want to get back to like how long does it actually take to apply an update, what we've generally said is regardless of the cluster size, the control plane update, we typically see that complete within somewhere between 60 to 120 minutes. So that's updating every single container, but it's not updating the OS for each node. The OS update, obviously, when you deal with the workers, that's bounded by how quickly we can drain and relocate and reschedule pods. And it's also, you may have policy which prevents us from making forward progress, because you've set a PDB max unavailable to 0 or something like that. And so that part of the upgrade process is potentially unbounded. And so when we talk about upgrades, that's generally what we say is it takes up to 120 minutes to apply all the container updates, and then the host updates can sort of trail on forever. And having any sort of skew in that is generally not a problem. It happens during all upgrades, so we have to support it. So if you have 10 nodes which haven't updated, that's not a critical situation.
And are there? You said that the control plane, kind of regardless of the rest of the cluster size, takes a pretty consistent amount of time. Are there factors that can affect that? And I'm thinking in particular things like storage latency for etcd, if it's having trouble quiescing or something like that, or if it's a super busy cluster, right? There's a lot of things happening in etcd when the node comes back up and it has to catch up, super technical term, with any changes that happened while it was down. Does that affect it?
I mean, definitely if the cluster is under duress and not meeting, performance requirements, then that will slow things down. Actually, a lot of the time spent during the upgrade is just gracefully terminating things and waiting for in-flight requests to complete. And so, like, you'll see there's a very slow initial start. etcd rolls out. We wait very carefully to make sure that we update one member, it comes back, it's healthy, and we go on. Same thing happens with like the API server. And the API server actually has like, you shut one down and it will wait. I don't know the exact timing, but up to 60 seconds or so for all in-flight processes to complete before it finally shuts itself down, updates, and moves on. So I think that's the largest sort of bounding factor there, is how fast we can just gracefully do everything. And maybe that's one thing worth mentioning is we generally don't, aside from restarting your workers and relocating workload, the control plane we generally don't view as a disruptive upgrade. And there we measure in our CI systems the total amount of disruption, and we generally see, if we say that the upgrade takes up to 2 hours, we generally see overall about 99% availability during that upgrade process. So that comes out to about a cumulative minute and a half of disruption while everything is rolling out. And that usually takes the form of like very short blips where, we do all the graceful draining and stuff like that, but certain clients may not, they have a connection that's open, and then suddenly that connection gets severed, and you retry and it works immediately, but there's a little bit of disruption there.
Yeah, the API server blipping as it rolls pods and stuff.
Yeah.
Dwayne asked an interesting question here, and it's one that honestly I've never had a production, or I haven't had a production OpenShift 4 cluster before. But it's, do you back up anything before an upgrade? Andrew, in my lab, I just YOLO it and hope for the best. But
every time.
Yeah, from a customer perspective, it's a good question.
Yeah, we starting with 4.9, etcd actually takes a snapshot as soon as you initiate an upgrade, and it blocks the upgrade process until that's done. But backup and recovery in a system that changes very quickly, like any Kubernetes cluster, like there's constantly probes that are going on, and pods are coming and going, and volumes are getting attached and detached from nodes. Like backups get very stale with the state of the cluster very quickly. And so if maybe it's worth talking about like rollback strategy and stuff like that. If something goes wrong during an upgrade, our intent is that nothing should ever go wrong and compromise the availability of the cluster. The upgrade may fail to make progress, but in no situation should we take a cluster down, or because we do this graceful draining and we wait for things to come back. So while we take backups as a precaution, we don't generally recommend that anyone, if you run into a problem, immediately stop and do a restore or anything like that. The backups are taken if I'm not aware of this ever happening, but if for some reason during that upgrade the entire cluster just fails, and so it's purely a disaster recovery thing, and we don't recommend that in any situation, unless the cluster has completely failed, do you immediately start using that backup to do a restore.
That makes sense to me, and I think for a couple of reasons. One, we've always said, and Johnny, how many times have you heard me say here on the stream of etcd backups are not a full cluster recovery option.
Mhm.
They're really useful when you have one or maybe two of the etcd nodes that fail, and you need to bring them back up to a certain level so that they can resync, faster and get back operating that much quicker. I think if you were going to back up or protect something prior to an upgrade of OpenShift, it would be the applications, not the OpenShift, because the OpenShift cluster in theory is disposable, right? Wink, wink. We're all doing that, right?
Let's
Um,
stop.
yeah. So to me, it's let's say like you said, Scott, you've never heard of it happening before, and I trust you to be more in touch with that than anyone else. But let's say that the cluster did go down. In theory, those pods, they would have quiesced, or they would have written data to a PVC that's going to still be there on whatever the backing storage is when you deploy a new cluster and redeploy the application. And container images and YAML definitions. If your devs are just going into the CLI and YOLOing an OC create command, that could be an issue, as opposed to using something more disciplined, even just a simple shared file repository of YAML files to help recover those apps.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think definitely like taking a more workload centric view of backups is a good approach, because if you think about the etcd scenario and um, you took a snapshot now and someone goes and they cycle something and they had a volume attached, and now it's no longer attached, you're going to restore that and it's going to go, or maybe that volume has been destroyed when it was detached, because that's typically what happens is, you try to clean up data, like it's going to go try to reattach that um, volume, and that volume may not exist in the cloud platform anymore. And so
Yeah.
that, like I said, it's a system that changes very rapidly. And so backups are good to have, but they're not like, you know, your first thing that you do if you run into problems during an upgrade.
Yeah, I'll say, and I don't want to speak for you, Johnny, but I know you and I have a similar mentality of like coming
Mhm.
from an infrastructure perspective, virtualization background. We tend to think of protecting the infrastructure and being able to quickly recover that underlying infrastructure. And OpenShift is not like that, right? The clusters are by and large disposable, and the goal is to get a new one deployed so that way you can recover the workload on top of it, rather than recovering the old infrastructure. And oftentimes the workload would come along with that.
Yeah.
Looking at you, virtualization solutions. I'm not talking about just VMware, right? Rev is the same way. OpenStack
Mhm.
in many ways is the same way. Um, so yeah. Um, so I want to ask about, and now my mind just completely went blank. I had a question, and then I started to talk, and then it left my head. I know we've only got a couple minutes. Johnny, I feel like I've been talking a lot. You got anything in the last 4 minutes
No,
before?
Scott, you covered it pretty well with the like when something's going wrong, because I kind of have this feeling that there's a lot of people that are asking like, okay, well, what happens when something goes wrong? Like specifically with etcd. So say when the upgrade is happening and etcd decides like I'm done, it just blows up, and then it's like, okay, or am I dead, or do I need to do something? But it sounds like it it shouldn't take down the whole cluster. We should just be able to maybe kill the upgrade pods and then let etcd come back up and restore itself. Does that sound about right? Like, have you ever seen an issue with etcd being the culprit during an update, and then you can just roll back to the pre-upgrade?
Um, I think I definitely have. And um, again, we whenever we face problems, we just try to stop.
Hmm.
And the CVO never goes on beyond. updating it. Like etcd updates as one atomic unit before we go on and update anything else. So in a scenario where we update one etcd member and for some reason that doesn't come back, you still have two, and you should still have a functional cluster. And generally what we say is, like, let's look at that member that didn't come back and try to figure out what's wrong. You could potentially just say, all right, well, especially with the newer features in 412 around control plane machine sets, you can actually go through and say, well, delete that master, and it would create a new one, and hopefully that new one comes up and joins the cluster fine. But yeah, that's generally, like, everything in the system is built to remain available, and when something doesn't work as expected, we just stop, and we want to, that's when you would call support and work through with them, or, all this is exposed. You can look at your logs, and maybe there's something obvious, like maybe your disk filled up for some reason on that first node, and you need to go and just delete some logs, and then restart the host, and then hopefully etcd comes back, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So Scott, I know you only have about 2 minutes left. Is there anything else that you wanted to communicate? Anything else you wanted to get out?
I know we said like the typical minor version rollout is about 60 days. We try to keep it very data driven. And so, all these connected clusters are sending us telemetry data. So we pay very close attention to telemetry data as both clusters upgrade into the newer version, but also just as valuably when new clusters are installed, because we actually find that the vast majority of issues are not like specific to upgrades. It's, there's just something wrong in the new version. And so it affects both installs and upgrades. And so the telemetry is a big input, but then we also scrape data from other sources. The entire support organization is dealing with customers in the field, and they may encounter something. So there are other feedback loops, and telemetry data it's machine driven, it's very reliable, and it's very quick, so we notice problems there very quickly. But then there, the slower feedback loops of someone creates a support case, and it may take a few days to get to us. So that's sort of why things do take as long as they do. We also, we need to get a critical mass of new clusters to have all the data that we need to sort of make those decisions. And so we have actually recently amended the documentation to say that we generally expect it to take between 45 and 90 days. But 60 days is actually the historic average ever since about 4.7. And it's been pretty reliably right around there.
Yeah. So I don't want to keep you any longer. Johnny and I will stay here. We're going to keep streaming for anyone in the audience. But Scott, I know you have another thing to get to. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you bailing us out and agreeing to join.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So
if
thank you
anyone
so
has
much.
questions, let me know. Bye.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So Scott's awesome. Like I said, I've been interacting with Scott in our various chat and everything else internally for literally years, answering questions for folks around updates and upgrades, and he's always like on the ball, responding to things, providing that engineering side of or engineering perspective. So I was so happy when he said that he had time and was able to join.
Yeah, he's awesome. I see him all the time in our internal channel. I feel bad for a lot of those guys because it's like, yes, DHCP is required. Here's the status on updates. It's like, it seems like it's always the same questions, but
Yeah,
I get it.
It comes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
So resetting a bit. Let's go back to the beginning of the stream here. So today is just a day of follies. I don't know what's going on. It's this line of storms that's traversing the East Coast, right? That's what it is.
We're in the upside down.
Yeah, because the stream started. Our intro video wouldn't play. Johnny couldn't change the theme of the stream that we're looking at today. Like, it's just been one of those days. So hello to our audience. Thank you for joining us. Apologies we didn't open like this, but like I said, we wanted to get as much time with Scott as we possibly could. Also, I feel like this is very selfish and random. Yes, I am standing today. I've been on meetings for the last, it's 11:30, so 4.5 hours.
Oof.
I think. So it was one of those, like, I made the mistake of not standing earlier in the day, so I was, it was just painful, and I decided, I'll stand for the stream. Well, what's the worst that happens, right? So it is good to stand up and stretch every once in a while. But yeah, so I hope it's not distracting to have this thing like covering and in the way and all that other stuff. Sometimes people get distracted by the background.
So far, it's been good for me, and I'm easily distracted. So.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We were so Tech Exchange is next week, right? And one of the demos, or one of the things that we're showing, is it mimics a dashboard of a car, and through the windshield of the mock car is Google Street View, because it's mimicking like the car driving down the road. And we realized that we basically have to pause this. Like, you open the car's dashboard, the car's interface, and like show maybe one or two updates and then pause it, because otherwise it's literally sickening, because it's this constant motion, and it's like you know it jumps down the road because it's all of that. So I'm ever since we figured that out 2-3 weeks ago, it's one of those, like, now I'm all paranoid about motion being distracting and
Hmm.
potentially literally sickening to folks. So
It's like a 4D ride. Yeah.
I still have, I don't remember where it was. One of the theme parks when my oldest was very little, we went to. It must have been a Disney one, because it had Lilo and Stitch. And you go in and you're sitting in this dark room, and it's a 4D thing, and it's meant to mimic, I think Stitch is the monster, like him
Mhm.
running around and like sniffing at you, so it like blows air on your neck. This absolutely terrified my, at the time, like 3-year-old son. Like, he was not happy about this happening. And ever since then, we avoid the 4D rides.
Oh my God. We rode the Harry Potter ride at Universal. Like the whatever it is, the one in the castle.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't get motion sickness, dude. I almost lost it. I mean, like there's like 50 kids coming off this Hagrid's ride, like right as I
Yeah.
came out. I went it's like 30 degrees outside. I went in a cold sweat. I'm like taking off my hoodie. I'm about, it was gonna happen. Like, I was walking up to the trash can, and this dude walks up to me and he goes, you get motion sickness? I'm like, I don't think so. He's like, here,
You do
dude.
now.
Yeah, and he gave me, I can't remember what it's called, the pill.
Dramamine.
Anyways, Dramamine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he gave me some Dramamine, and yeah, that helped because I was done.
Yeah. Just got to get you some of the butterbeer.
Oh, that stuff is so good. Yes,
Nothing like butterscotch flavored drink
that's
to
right.
settle your stomach. Yeah. So this is, sorry, I'm going to completely change directions here on you, because otherwise I'll completely railroad, and you and I spend a lot of time just chit chatting with each other. We get to see each
Yeah.
other in 2 weeks. Yeah, because you'll
Yep.
be in Dallas next week.
Yep.
So hello to our audience. This is an office hours live stream, which means that we're here to answer questions. So Scott talked about updates a few minutes ago. We're happy to continue answering questions about that. If there's anything that Johnny and I can't answer, then we'll certainly reach back to Scott as well as to the rest of the team to get those answers. But don't let that stop you from asking about anything and everything. 4.12 just launched. There's a lot of cool stuff that's going on inside of there. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to be talking about over the next set of streams that we've got planned out, so long as we can keep people from jumping around on us. We did reconfirm our guest for that was supposed to be for today for 2 weeks, Johnny? 3 weeks.
Yep. The 15th.
15th. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll be back after our travels and all that other stuff. Hello, Tal. Good to see you. Let's see, Scott, keep in mind that removal recommendation keeps the update path available should the admin choose to accept the risk. Yeah, that's a good point. So with many of the updates, and I think this is what Scott is saying, as an admin, you can force an update. Like, regardless of what the tool says, you can always tell it to update to a specific version and get past that. But yeah, conditional updates, conditional upgrades, they're awesome. Although I will say that the conditional updates, I think, have still broken the update or upgrade path interface. Do you know if that's been fixed, Johnny?
I do not know.
I have a link up handy to it. The upgrade path tool, which we've shown before, I just don't have a link for Basically, it's a tool on access.redhat.com where you can go in and you plug in your current version and the version you want to go to, and it will say, oh, there's, here's how you get there. You go from this version to this version to this version, or whatever that happens to be. But I think conditional upgrades have broken it, because if it's a conditional, it shows up as not a valid path. The admin has to go in and accept that condition, right? Accept the risk associated with it. So yeah, it's ChrisOps. I don't know what ChrisOps is, or Hope 9.
I think it's Christians.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know if Christian's on. I haven't seen him lately. But yeah, so anyways, the upgrade tool is super handy, but conditional updates, the last time I looked, admittedly, it's been a few months, it wasn't working correctly. Let's see. Let's okay. Thank you. So let's talk about some top of mind stuff. Again, we're flipping this episode around. We're doing the first part second and the second part first. So let's talk about a couple of different things. One, I've seen this come up a number of times. I don't know why recently, but several times over the last couple of weeks, I've seen it come up that vMotion is not supported. And quite simply, that isn't true. I will admit, and I will say, that we have had some confusing and potentially conflicting information in the past. And I will very readily admit that our wording could be improved. But in general and specifically, compute vMotion is supported. So what do we mean by compute vMotion? Go to the docs here. Go to 412 and go to installing and scroll down here to vSphere. There's so many installation platforms now. I remember when it was like 5.
Yeah, it used to be really easy.
So if I go to this installing on a vSphere cluster and I scroll down, there should be, I think it's in here. I usually find it, vMotion. So we have this using OpenShift Container Platform with vMotion. OpenShift Container Platform generally supports compute-only vMotion. So compute-only here is referring to just a standard vMotion, right? We're only changing the host that the virtual machine is executing on, as opposed to storage vMotion, where it changes the data store that it's using at the same time. So I realize that, and this is where I say it might be slightly confusing for some people, because a lot of people, I think, interpret compute only to mean only worker nodes. But the control plane is absolutely supported as well for doing a standard vMotion, i.e. not a storage vMotion. So why does this come up? Why has this historically been an issue? So a lot of folks have have maybe experienced some issues where, in particular, a control plane node will go unreachable, or maybe etcd will, I won't say flake out, but where it'll have a couple of blips. Every time, and when I've talked with our engineering teams and support teams, like every time they have seen this, it has been a result of effectively a vMotion environment or a vSphere environment that is, shall we say, suboptimal. So what do I mean by that? I mean things like there might be network congestion, there might be storage congestion, right? There might be something that would cause that cutover time, CPU contention, to be extended beyond what you would normally expect. So VMware has a set of vMotion best practices, and this is what we tend to point folks at. I don't remember where one of these is the right one, and I can never remember which one it is. Yeah, that's a Dell, so it's probably this one. But effectively, we just want to follow these recommendations inside of here. There's also a KCS article that I'll dig up here in a moment once I stop running my mouth, that points to like recommendations on how to ensure vMotions. So compute-only vMotion is successful the vast majority of the times. But I just want to reiterate, I want to stress, vMotion is supported with OpenShift for all node types. Doesn't matter if it's control plane, infrastructure, right? All of those things, it is supported. And it would be I don't know. It would be crazy to me if we didn't support vMotion. Like, that's one of the big things. I will
Mhm.
say, and Johnny, you've heard me say this before, that and many folks who have watched the stream long term have probably heard me say, there is some consideration for pinning OpenShift compute nodes to certain vSphere hypervisors. If you're, especially if you're overcommitting, you want to manage capacity and stuff like that. The stream that we did around capacity management, we talked about this at length. Of, if my cluster, my vSphere cluster is overcommitted, CPU memory wise, and I have multiple OpenShift compute nodes hosted on each one of my vSphere hypervisors. What happens if a vSphere hypervisor fails? Now it's going to be restarting those OpenShift compute nodes onto existing nodes that are already overcommitted, that might already be experiencing contention. And when those OpenShift nodes rejoin the cluster, it's going to immediately begin to reschedule workload to those. So it has the potential for basically exasperating, any contention issues, any, making the recovery longer, all of that type of stuff. So in some conditions, in certain scenarios, it may make sense to not vMotion those, to pin them to specific nodes, but that doesn't mean that it's not supported to vMotion them. To be clear. So I hope that helps. Let's see. So the next one that I wanted to talk about here is vSphere version support. So it was pointed out to me this morning that this is not entirely accurate. So vSphere 8 is still not supported from what I understand. So just be aware that as of this moment, it is for OpenShift 4.12, 7.0.2 or later, but less than 8. 4.11, I think it still works with 6.7. Oh no, we're saying 7.02 there as well. Okay. That's what I get for not reading the docs studiously. Yeah. 7.01 earlier is now deprecated. There we go. Let's see. What else did I have? I had another one. Minimum node sizing. It was just a random question that came up from one of the folks on my team. They were looking for the minimum node sizing, and we definitely don't make it easy to find because I don't think so. Here's minimum versions, but I don't think anywhere do we ever say, at least on this page, do we ever say like, here's the size of the virtual machines that you need to use.
Mhm.
It could be because it's IPI, and IPI just does it for you.
Yeah, I always look at like the bare metal or the UPI.
Yeah, minimum resource requirements for cluster installation. So yeah, you have to look at either a UPI install type or the non-integrated platform agnostic, installing on any platform, and it'll tell you what those node requirements are. So it's not always obvious, especially if you're, if you're doing like an IPI install, but then you want to manually add some nodes afterwards, that type of stuff. Also note that if you're doing a compact cluster, so a cluster where it's only 3 nodes and you have both compute and control plane functions combined, effectively you add these two sets of things together. So the minimum node size for those 3 nodes in that cluster would be 6 CPUs and 24 gigabytes of memory. I hope my math is right there, because never do arithmetic in public. You'll only embarrass yourself.
Public math is great.
Yeah. I just noticed that they added this IOPS column here too. I don't think that used to be there. So that's good, I guess. I always feel like IOPS is the less meaningful storage measure, as latency is the more meaningful one, but glad to see that they're at least adding it. There is a KB to calculate it. I don't know what the context is there.
To calculate the size.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd have to, unfortunately it is not listed, and I have to dig it up, which I'm not logged into the customer portal, so I can't dig around right now. Capacity optimization stream. Thank you for posting that, Johnny. 4.0 is AWS only. Yes, you are correct, but 4.0 was also never released. The first 4.x version was 4.1.
Yep.
We can see that in the in this up here. A lot of people forget we never had a 3.8 either.
I remember that.
Yeah. So 4.0 was only AWS, and then 4.1. I guess we could go back and look here. 4.1. Yeah, AWS, Bare Metal, and vSphere were your options. And then I think it was 4.5 was when vSphere IPI came along. Yeah. Here we go. Installing a cluster. So yeah, trip down memory lane. 4.5. It was almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, man.
2.5 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun.
I remember I was at Tech Exchange when 4.1 was about to release, and so like, we're all like, CoreOS, like what? What's the operator? What? Like what's all this craziness?
I was new to Red Hat at the time because I think it released in early 2019, from what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like 6 months after I had joined Red Hat, and I spent 6 months like learning OpenShift 4 and operators and the install process. And it's like I got super frustrated with all of these things, and like because operator, why do I need an operator? Why do I have to go here to change this thing when I can just go in and change it in the config file and have it to make that mental shift. Ryan, really know your OpenShift history. Thank you. I it's more of a I've just been around for a minute. So yeah, and I also focused. So installer stuff is a little bit cheating for me because for a long time as a tech marketing person, my one of my SME topics was the installer. I used to focus on installation, CoreOS, etcd, like all networking, kind of all of these low layer things. And then I've always relied on other folks on the wider tech marketing team for expertise around like application level stuff. GitOps, like Johnny, you're my GitOps go-to now. Christian's dead to me. So I hope he's
Poor
listening
Christian.
too. Yeah,
Poor
or maybe this is going to YouTube, right? Can we like clip that on YouTube and send it to him? That's what I need to
That'll
figure
be
out
the
how to
short for this episode. Christian's dead.
Now I need to watch my Slack counter down here in the corner and see if he starts messaging me on Slack.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I see you dropped a couple of things in here as well. Please.
Yeah, let me bring it up really quick. Okay, yeah. So there was really two big announcements this week. I think they're kind of big, but like the first one was Red Hat OpenShift Data Science, or Rhodes. Their on-prem support just went GA. So Rhodes was a cloud-based service, and if you don't know what Rhodes is, it's essentially the data science capability as a cloud service. So you get things like Jupyter notebooks. There's some other public notebooks that they put out there, but all the things that you need for AI/ML workloads and stuff like that, it's built around that. And they've moved that from not only being a cloud offering, but now to an on-prem offering. Another big key thing coming out of that is that right now air-gapped isn't supported, but in this next release, in the next a few weeks, it says end of January, beginning of February, they're going to release air-gapped support. So if you have Jupyter notebooks, or you're doing data science capable tooling on your clusters in an air-gapped environment, that stuff is all it's on the way. And they're going to follow some of the same releases as the cloud services. So if they release an update for the data science cloud service, then the on-prem will have that same update, and that's generally about every 3 weeks or so. And then the other one was OpenShift Pipelines 1.9. rHope 9 had mentioned Tecton 1.9 is out. So there's a lot of GitHub and other like SCM providers, so source control manager providers. So webhooks for Bitbucket, GitLab, and GitHub are now all supported, which is pretty cool. There's just a bunch of cool stuff coming out with OpenShift pipelines. There's some PR status report, and then you can do events. This one was a cool one that I thought. Events and filtering, so you can have a pipeline per event. So as like maybe you have an OpenShift serverless trigger, then you can have a pipeline or whatever. I don't know how it works. I'm not that application centric, but just a bunch of cool things that are coming out with the pipelines, this code feature to just enhance it and make it better. And then the last one is there's a blog for what's new in ACS, and it just kind of going over some of the things that are coming out. The one big thing that I thought was super awesome that I can't wait to actually kick the tires with is the automated network policy generator. So before you deploy something, it'll generate a network policy for you, and it'll be available in the ACS console. So I think that that's just going to be amazing. So looking forward to that. And then the other ones are just UBI9 support and improved vulnerability management.
UBI9, yeah,
Yeah. Crazy.
I don't even remember, when does CoreOS switch over to RHEL 9 base? I don't remember.
I have no idea. Yeah. Soon
Yeah,
though,
that'll be
I
happening.
see him like talking about it.
So yeah, that'll be happening sometime. That's kind of cool. I also think ACS, they're also moving away from the RocksDB and over towards Postgres now.
Yep.
So I think I mentioned that before. I never knew it used a quote unquote proprietary database. I don't know if it was literally proprietary or just like a modification to
Yeah.
some
Brandon Maria or
underlying.
whatever.
Yeah, but I never knew that, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
What else was I gonna say? There was something else. Dwayne, Rhoda. So Rhoda is something different. So Rhoda is Red Hat OpenShift database access.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is more or less. Let me think of a good way to describe this. It is a service that you can go to. So basically, your databases would put connection information into Rhoda, and your applications can then look to Rhoda to get access to that. So it acts like a broker for them to get access into resources. Rhodes, Red Hat OpenShift Data Science, is historically until now, it's been a managed platform for doing data science type work. As Johnny said, you can go in, you can click the thing and say, I want a new Jupyter Hub playbook, and I need X amount of CPU memory and GPU, and you click the button and you're dropped into a place where you can immediately begin working. You don't have to. It's a simplified interface. It's a streamlined way of getting data scientists access to resources, and with it being on-prem, that to me is it's interesting, right? Because it will hopefully allow those data scientists to focus on data science and not having to learn Kubernetes or not having to learn OpenShift vernacular. They just go in and click some buttons and their stuff works.
Yeah, exactly. And having the image streams and all that stuff with those notebooks available, or with the way for you to, like, hey, here's where my notebooks are if I already have some, and it'll ingest them in the image, and then the Rhoda will actually pick that up, and then your stuff will be available within the toolkit, which makes it it's just really streamlined and really nice.
Yeah. For Red Hat folks who are watching, so there is a open hybrid cloud demo available that includes Red Hat OpenShift Data Science inside of there. So you can go and get hands-on. You can look at it. You can do all the things with it, including run through a couple of different queries and update machine learning models and all that other stuff. It's really cool. And I think there's several other dedicated ones as well, but I favor the open hybrid cloud one because it's sort of an end-to-end thing, which is neat. I'm also slightly biased. I may have participated in it.
Got some skin in the game.
It's I'd say it's shameless self-promotion, but while it is shameless, it's not just self-promotion because I only had a very small portion of it, so it's promoting other people's work too.
There you
go. Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of things that are coming up next, Johnny. So one, we have, and let me bring up my page here. So one, as we sort of alluded to earlier today, and we mentioned it last week, Johnny and I will be both traveling for the next 2 weeks. So the live stream, Ask an OpenShift Admin, will not be streaming until February 15th. So we will miss you all. Again, I said this like before. It feels so strange to basically over 6 weeks we'll have done 2 streams. Or 7 weeks we'll have done 2 streams, which feels super weird to me. But yeah, it is what it is, right? We gotta do what we're paid to do.
Right.
I have a tiny bit of a spam issue. Did I miss a
Yeah.
spam thing? Oh yeah, I see it.
I got it. I got it as soon as I could. Like I saw it in Restream once, but it was already in Twitch like 4 times.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll take care of those. Do I have? Oh, there we go. I can delete them out of maybe I can delete them out of here. No, it tells me unable to delete message. All right, we'll sort that out. Thank you for letting us know, Rick. Appreciate that. We try to keep it under control, but sometimes bots. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 weeks from now, February 15th is when we'll be back. Johnny, we think, or that should be logging, right? I saw somebody mention OpenShift logging was updated.
Yep, that's our Hope 9 calling out that 5.6 just got released as well. And good call. Thank you for that because I missed it. And we have the product manager from OpenShift logging on the 15th. She's going to come on and tell us all things. And I think she's going to do some demos and stuff like that. So it's been a long time coming. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah. There's been lots of questions, lots of interest on logging, particularly as we make the switch over to Vector, which is now fully GA, I think. Maybe even the default. I think it was GA in 4.0 or logging 5.5. And now it's the default with logging 5.6. Maybe don't quote me on that. Right. Yeah, don't quote me on that. I'm remembering things that went passed by, zooming by an email. But after that, I don't think we have any major interruptions. Like, not until Summit,
Yep.
which is in May. So yeah, we'll have like 2 months, 2 solid months. Like 8 streams where we'll just be talking about all things 4.12 and kind of anything else that comes up inside of there. I'm looking at our list of things that we identified. So we know we want to talk about the disconnected agent-based installer. Somebody sent us an email about that. Thank you for the request. Or maybe it was a message. I don't remember. The eBPF network observability. This is one that I know very little about, but I'm super excited to learn more because it looks really, really cool. Being able to see what's happening inside of the network and traffic flows and how things are going between pods and all that other stuff. That's really awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. No FIP support for Vector in 5.6. Oh, that's disappointing. The security profile operator, topology aware lifecycle manager. That was another one I did not know that existed until the What's New session. And I saw that and I was like super impressed. I even sent a message over to the team in Slack and was like, this is awesome. Where have you all been? Like, so we definitely want to get them on. We definitely want to talk about the topology aware lifecycle manager stuff. All of these things, there is the little blurbs in the What's New. So if you go back and watch the What's New stream from 2 weeks ago now, you'll see all of these things just in little blips. We're going to deep dive into them as we get to these streams. Logging, let's see, service mesh, see if we can get Ortwin back to talk about what's going on with service mesh. And then I'm going to hit up Mr. John Spinks again and see if we can talk about some new stuff that's going on with OpenShift, Red Hat Insights for OpenShift, because there's lots of cool stuff going on there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, eBPF is basically black magic. I've been a Linux admin for like literally my whole career, 20 plus years. And there's some things that happen at the kernel level, like eBPF, that it is a black magic. Yeah, I agree with you, Rick. Like, so I'm kind of interested to get a little more knowledge and get maybe get my hands a little dirty and figure out what that looks like and what we can learn about it. Either that or I'll just become a regular consumer and just, pretty charts. Let's go. I like pretty charts. I don't care how they got there. I'm okay with that too. Yeah.
Pretty.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So yeah, I don't have anything else, Johnny. I think we kind of rolled through everything that we had. I'm pausing here to see if anything comes to mind, and also to see if you had anything.
No, I think once we get back, it's just it'll be a whirlwind again, But looking forward to it. I think that there's going to be a lot of good things. There's so much coming out that we have to talk about, and having everybody come on and show us the ropes and answer questions. I think is going to be a lot of fun. So, but yeah, for today, I'm in like trying to get into presenter mode, So we'll see how it goes.
I'm with you. My morning today was taken up by rehearsals because we're doing the keynote. So I had to go through and do the rehearsals and check our environments and validate everything and all that other stuff. And it's it's been a few years since I did a keynote, because doing it virtually is just not the same. And so it's
Right.
it's fun and it's challenging, but it can be a little exhausting. So I'm happy. I'm happy to be involved because we get to show off really cool stuff, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think I need to check. I need to find out if we can basically do all that stuff here on the stream, because it's all stuff that's possible today, and that would be really cool.
That would be cool. Oh man, yeah, that would be awesome. Especially, like some of the talks that didn't get accepted. To take some of those and maybe do some of those on the stream as well. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Or Hope 9 making a plug for ACS there. Thank you. I promise I don't forget about them on purpose. All right. So to our audience, thank you so much for joining us for this slightly different stream today. Again, doing the second thing first and the first thing second. We hope that this has been useful. If you have any questions right now while you're listening to us, please go ahead and post those in chat. We'll do our best to answer them before we end the stream. If you're not listening to us live, by all means, send us questions. Johnny and I both love to get messages, emails, etc. from anyone and everyone. So you can reach me at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com via email. That's probably going to be the best way. Our Hope 9, I think I have an email from you that I need to reply to. I admit that I have been way far more than usual behind on email. So
yeah,
I will prioritize that and get a response to you. But yeah, so reach out via email on all of the various socials at Practical Andrew. I admit that I'm avoiding Twitter right now because it's very noisy. Like I haven't figured out how to get back my old timeline of just show me the people that I subscribe to in a chronological order. But that's a user error, I assume. But yeah, otherwise, let's see what Reddit and all of the other places. You can also join us on Slack. So the Kubernetes Slack has an OpenShift users channel that you can join. And Johnny and I, along with like 4,000 of our closest friends, are all in there. It's a great place to get help. And then, of course, you can reach out to Johnny as well, JONNY at redhat.com or JRockTX1 on all the various socials. Yep. And thank you for taking care of social speaking of which today, Johnny.
Well, thank you for everything else. So,
yeah. All right, y'all. So yeah, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. We will see you in 3 weeks on February the 15th. Where we'll be talking about logging. And with that, I will leave any last words to you, Johnny.
Yeah. Good seeing you again. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Just for everybody that's watching, we will not have the outro because it doesn't work right now. So we're just going to end abruptly. So good stream. Thanks, Scott. If you're listening, thank you so much for really the last minute accepting and coming on and helping us out. Like this was really awesome and really informative. So yeah, that's it for me.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Later.